Just so you know, I have permission to share this, and my wife will get back at me, so don't be concerned about that. My wife, my beloved wife Sarah, has an obsession with the royal family, with the history of the monarchy. And normally, this doesn't affect the quality of life in my family, but this last month it has. It's been royalty month, and our house has been ambushed with books on Queen Elizabeth and King Henry VIII and movies. And so I've been watching movies about princesses and parties and shoes and, of course, beheadings and adultery and an obsession with the male heir. And I'm not saying I'm bitter about this. I'm just sharing it with you. Well, the reason I'm sharing this is because I was reading the story of the conversion of Saul this week, which will be the focus of this sermon. I kept thinking about the movie Elizabeth, the one that won a few Academy Awards a while back. And we have to keep this quiet, because if Sarah knows that this gives me sermon material, then this will never stop. But anyway, at the beginning of the movie Elizabeth, it starts with a scene where there are 3 Protestants who are being burned at the stake. So they've been rounded up because they've left the church, and they're talking about salvation by faith alone, and they're being burned at the stake as heretics. And this is, in British history, this is just after King Henry VIII. And King Henry VIII left the Catholic Church to get a divorce, and this sent England into turmoil. And following Henry VIII, his son was on the throne for just a little while, and then he died. And then his daughter from the first marriage, Mary, took the throne, and she was sympathetic to Catholics. And at the same time, Elizabeth was prepared to take the throne after her, and she was sympathetic to Protestants. And there were many who wanted Elizabeth assassinated so that she would never take the throne. Well, a few scenes later in this movie, then, Elizabeth, who is not yet queen, is arrested and taken in to be questioned, and she's questioned about why she's sympathetic to Protestants. And they're grilling her, a bishop and a few other authorities, a bishop from the church. And at one point she says, "Don't we all worship the same God?" And the bishop from the Catholic Church is just incensed by this statement, and we know that she's a goner. Well, fortunately for her, her half-sister Mary dies soon, and then she's able to take the throne. But even after Elizabeth takes the throne, she's not safe. At one point, the Pope sends a priest up to England to organize an assassination attempt on Elizabeth so that England could rejoin the church and everything could be whole again. The Reformation was a time of great anxiety and confusion about what it meant to be a Christian and who truly was a Christian and who wasn't. And it depended on who you asked. So if you asked a Protestant, they would say, "Well, of course I'm a Christian. Luther's reforms are just returning us to what the church has always been." And if you asked a Catholic who was a Christian, they would say, "Well, of course those Protestants are heretics because they defied the Pope and they've left the church." Well, this whole time in history sheds some light on what we see in the first century in Judaism. And it's the same question is going around in the background of our story from Acts for today. Except in this instance, with our story from Acts, the question is, who is truly a Jew? Who is a true Jew? So as we pick up the story in Acts, Jesus has been raised. The Holy Spirit has come upon the disciples, and the disciples are being sent out to live out the realm of God, help create it, and also talk about Jesus, to proclaim about Jesus. And in chapter 7 in Acts, one of the apostles, Stephen, has been arrested for his work and sharing about Jesus, and he's been brought into the authorities in Jerusalem. And while he's being questioned, he defends himself, and he's talking about Jesus, and the crowd around is getting so incensed and enraged at his defense that they grab a hold of Stephen and they drag him outside of town. They drag him outside of Jerusalem, and they start stoning him, and they stone him to death. And we're told at the end of this chapter that there's a young man there named Saul. And all the people who are stoning Stephen are laying their coats at the feet of Saul. And we're told that Saul approves of the killing of Stephen. So as we read our story for today, we know that Saul is not a fan of the Jesus people. And then in our passage for today, he goes into the high priest, and he says to the high priest, "Look, is there any mail for the synagogues in Damascus? Because I'll take that mail with me, and I'll deliver it to the synagogues in Damascus. And while I'm there, I'll just look around and see if there are any followers of the way in the synagogues. And if I happen to find any, I'll just bind them up and bring them back to you, and you can do whatever you wish with them. Now, we don't often think about this, or perhaps even realize this, because today Judaism and Christianity are such separate religious traditions. We see them as separate religious traditions. But the earliest followers of Jesus saw themselves as Jews. They saw Jesus as the fulfillment of Judaism. And they were meeting at the synagogue along with everybody else. That's why Saul is going to the synagogue to find the followers of the way, because they saw themselves as Jews still. And like in the time of the Reformation, there's confusion concerning what it means to truly be a Jew. The Sadducees would tell you one thing. The Zealots would tell you something else. The Pharisees would tell you another thing altogether. And then the followers of the way, the followers of Jesus, would say, well, Jesus is a fulfillment of the whole deal. But Saul and other Pharisees are very annoyed by this, and they're determined to make this stop. So Saul is kind of like the high priest hitman, and he's on his way to Damascus to find these followers of the way and to bring them back. And they're either going to be thrown in jail or murdered. Something's going to happen to them, just like with Stephen. And that's what makes this story so incredible. So on his way to Damascus, a light flashes all around Saul. And Saul might think that this is a meteor, but we know that that only happens in Wisconsin. And it's Jesus. And this voice says, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And Saul says, who are you? And the voice says, it's Jesus, whom you are persecuting. And we might think that here Jesus would say, now leave my people alone and scram, or I'm the good shepherd, I protect the sheep, so get out of here. But Jesus says instead, enter Damascus and you will be told what to do. Jesus brings the enemy closer. And he's not done yet. Then Jesus speaks to a disciple named Ananias in a vision. Ananias, I want you to go to a street called Straight, and there you will find a man named Saul of Tarsus. And I want you to lay your hands on him so that he may regain his sight.